Afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for having me in this webinar. My name is Zianda Manjati. I'm based in Bizane, but born from Tata. I've worked or I've been involved with this since before the class action itself or the settlement with Richard Spoor attorneys. That's when I was exposed into mining communities where we were collecting all the necessary data so that the litigation can be a success. But after the settlement itself, I met, in fact, during all that process, I worked very closely with Catherine Maybeck and Richard Paklepa in the film called Dying for Gold, where we traveled around the Eastern Cape doing all the interviews to these affected communities. That's when I became aware exactly of the issues and challenges that these communities face. Yes, we are not coming from an area where we have a mining industry itself, but we are affected, or these communities are also affected in a way, because more especially the Pondoland area, that's where most of ex-mine workers come from, also all the way to former Transkei. So when I worked very closely with them conducting these interviews, it brought some sorrows in a way, because I ended up understanding exactly what is it that they go through as families rather than collecting the data itself. A few things that I'm going to talk about is that as someone who works on the ground, once the ex-mine worker is employed by TEBA, because TEBA is the one that was doing all the work on the ground with the traditional leaders, most of these men left their families in a young age. So they spent their years working on the mines. So they will leave probably their wives, their children behind to go and work for their families. The only thing they understand and the language that they understand is the mining language. So there is nothing beyond that, because they didn't even have the time to go to school. So 90% of them are not educated. So after the life after the mining, that's where the problem starts. When this man this ex-mine worker now is being retrenched, more especially when he's retrenched due to medical incapacity, having TB or silicosis, or probably being injured on the mine. That's when the abuse, that's when the stress, that's where the life changes. So in my journey, I have met various families. This includes men and women and children. There are families whereby GBV, for instance, is being conducted simply because the men cannot produce or cannot provide, for the family like before. So now you find out that the wife has to take care of these men who comes from the mine, and they are sick, whether from TB or silicosis. They don't even have the strength to work anymore. So once a man does not work, then the dignity is no longer there. This frustrates these families in a way. The wife has to carry all the burden, having to support now for the family rather than being supported. The man, the husband has been away for a decade. Now he's coming home without any money, because most of them, they were retrenched to say, okay, you are going to be compensated after you arrive at home. But when there are communication around that between the miner and the mining company, including TEBA offices, they do not get any assistance when it comes to that. So they ended up leaving all that to say, I have lost hope. I cannot get my money or cannot get any compensation because I don't know where to go. Then that's when the wife come in, or even just the children, they come in, they have to provide. We have families that only depend solely in the child support grant, because that's what our government is doing these days. So you find out that there's the only source of income in that, it is that child support grant, probably for 2 or 3 children in the house. Then once that ex-mine worker is sick and is unable to provide, most of the cases, women leave. Some of the families, you will find out that there's a living ex-mine worker living with TB or silicosis, living with children because the wife has decided to leave because of the burden that they carry. So yes, we cannot run away from the fact that these people were earning something, but the brutality behind it has not assisted any of these communities. Instead, they have destroyed many families. We have families that are being led by children, whereby their only children, the mother probably has passed away, the father has also passed away because of the illness that he got from the mines. So you find out those children only depends on the family members. So when you come in as an activist, hearing those stories, and probably you know that you want to assist, but because of the challenges that are within the compensation space, you cannot assist as in yesterday, but it drags and it takes years for us to be able to assist these families. We have situations whereby children are dropping out of school simply because of financial stability that is not there. They cannot even afford to buy sanitary towels, shoes, uniform, you can count. So those challenges, and those children have to find themselves having to work probably for their aunts, for other families, do each and everything that can bring money within the family. So those are some of the challenges that these families face, let alone the issue of health issues itself. Because if you find an ex-mine worker coming from the mine, probably he was not sick by the time he retrenched, probably by the age. But in the long run, you find out this particular ex-mine worker will start getting sick. So you have ex-mine workers with HIV, we have ex-mine workers with TB, more especially the silicosis one. With the TB, obviously, the family, some of the family members will get sick also, because one, even our facilities in the Eastern Cape, when it comes to clinics, government hospitals, sometimes the treatment is not even there. Sometimes the man is just coughing, unaware that he's suffering from TB up until a later stage. So there are those issues around mining. So we can never separate GBV with mining communities. For me, it goes hand in hand, because once you cannot provide as a man, the only thing that you do is become violent. So those are the things that we have experienced and witnessed among these families. Also, the emotional and psychological abuse that these women experience because they carry the burden. It's not easy to live all your life with the extended family without your partner, only to find out that when you get the chance to stay with the partner, you only have few years of that. The only thing that you know or you can experience as the wife is just to take care of this ill person up until death. So those are the things that we tend to meet or to experience on the ground on a daily basis. But unfortunately, it is not something that we cannot undo. It is there, but what is it that our government is doing with the situation rather than supporting these families with the child support grant? Also talking about the compensation that they are getting from this settlement, it's not even much, because what is it that you can do with 70,000, 250,000 for your life? You don't have a shelter, you have to raise your children, and so on and so forth. Lastly, in some of the families, young men have to work because there's that agreement that mining companies usually do. When the miner leaves the mine, then the son has to fill in that position, more especially if the cause of retrenchment was medical incapacity. So these young men, the history is repeating itself again. Their young life is being taken away again by the brutality of the mining companies, because they have done that from their fathers and they are still doing it even today. Let me not dwell much, but this is the kind of the work that we are doing, also assisting these ex-mine workers and the families to access the compensation either from the MBOD or CMSO Trust. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Ziyanda. Thank you very much for that very insightful and detailed description of what is happening. Just for the listeners, TEBA is the recruiting agency for mine labor. And then the retrenchments that are taking place on the mines at the moment because of the low platinum price and also the gold mining sector going into decline, and of course Anglo leaving and abandoning mines but abandoning workers at the same time increases the burdens on clinics and on health facilities in the Eastern Cape. And very often the retrenchments happen without proper consultation with people in the Eastern Cape, and suddenly the clinics get overrun by demand for medicines and so on that was not there before. There's a sudden increase, and so the system itself begins to break down. Thank you very much. I think that we will move on immediately to Refilwe Mofokeng of Women Against Mining Activity, about her experiences in the communities that she is working with regard to the situation of gender-based violence.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity that I'm being given. I go by the name of Refilwe Mofokeng. I am the WAMUA National Organizer. So WAMUA stands for Women Affected by Mining United in Action. But I will start by giving an overview of what MAKUA is all about. So MAKUA is a national movement which stands for Mining Affected Communities United in Action. So MAKUA is a national movement that is led by people who live with dust, people who live with the blasting, people who lived with the poisoned water and violence in the mining communities. We experience that on a daily basis. So what we do in MAKUA, we organize every day because mining companies, we realize that, that's what they want to do. They just want to take everything from us, as affected communities. So WAMUA, it is the women's structure under MAKUA. So I will be speaking lengthily in regards with women issues, right? So WAMUA, it is the women's structure, like I'm saying. So what we also do, we organize and champion the struggles of women in their mining affected communities, because we know that women, they carry a lot of burden. Women, they have the hardest impacts that they live with because of mining system. It's actually very violent, to our land. It is very violent to our water, and it also raises like make us be violent as women, you know. So we all know that mining causes a very deep harm to communities. That's a fact that we cannot run for. We lose land, rivers, and our air gets polluted on a daily basis. Farming and grazing die. And we know that as women, that is our production. That is where we make money through farming. That is where we are able to can put bread on the table for our kids, right? So people are being pushed out of their homes. Like if I can make an example, where I'm staying is the mining affected communities in Mirafo. There are sinkholes where I stay, and people have been taken out from their homes due to the mining activities that we see on a daily basis. So local communities economic, I mean, it breaks because when we resist, we are being treated like criminals, especially as women that live an extra layer of harm. So as women, we face the same pollution, right, as men. But in the displacement of everyone else, we say that we face gendered violence, especially in the mining areas. We are in a 16 days of activism period now. So we know that GBV is a global factor. It is a global, actually, it is a pandemic that we are seeing on a daily basis. And we also know that GBV, it rises in our homes. It rises in the streets. We see it in our workplaces, and it has become a norm, to live with GBV. So some women are being pushed out into being, into the unsafe survival economic, and police and private security, security companies, they treat women as protesters with particular cruelty. So as Wamua, we say that women's health, it also take a very direct hit because there is toxic water that we get. There is dust that we live with. There are chemicals that enters our bodies. And we know that as women, our bodies are very fragile. So in the mining affected communities, we get that clinics are very far from where we stay. And our clinics are under-resourced. And we get pregnant women that carry a lot of heavy risk or burdens. So when sickness spreads in a community, women are the ones who have to do the unpaid care or the unpaid work because they have to keep the families alive. So as we're more, we have realized that mining, it deals with unusual mates without us, because companies, they like these mining companies, actually what they do is they speak to politicians, ne? They speak to traditional leaders, they speak to men leaders, if I have to be specific. We as women, we are not being represented. Now it looks like we are being represented by these politicians and traditional leaders. And that's where we are saying women are expected to accept decisions about our land, about their lands and their lives, uh, in a constant that is being taken from them. So us as Wamua, we are really, really doing our best to make sure that we can never accept such. So opportunities, we know that they shrink because of mining. Like generally they shrink. Really, this brings, this actually brings not having decent jobs for women. Women have to go through that thing of sleeping with guys, you know, because they would want to get a job in a mine, and this really destroys their livelihood or, their personalities. And we like to say that we increase, as Wamua, we like to take care, or rather help the women to take care of the burdens that they are already carrying. I mean, when water is dirty, women are the ones that have to walk further to make sure maybe they go to the rivers and get water. When food is scarce, we know that women have to go and make a plan for the family. And what we say when we say the family, meaning even these men, as a woman, you need to make sure that you get them food. So literally the whole family, men and the children, are looking up to women to make sure that they are being, well taken care of. So women, they rebuild homes times like again and again, so you would understand that extraction doesn't only, dig minerals out of earth, but it digs safety, it digs the time, the dignity, and the future that is put out of women. So Wamua, actually, it began in 2012, if I can just give you a brief, after that Marikana massacre. So it was all over the news. And when the country saw that communities already knew mining wealth was protected by the violence. So women were already holding families and resistance together. But as women, we actually needed our own organized power. That's where Wamua was organized, because we saw that women have to take charge now, because things are now, are now very bad. So over the years, Wamua has built women's circles around our branches, because we have branches around the entire country. So where there are mines, you will find Makua. So Like I'm saying that we have built the women's circles around the country and in our local groups across the mining areas. So these are places where women like we meet, ne? We learn, we support each other, and we plan actions together. So we train women, as well more, we train women in the mining affected communities, to organize and to document what is happening through this feminist. So we do communities research. That's what we normally do. That is very important because our knowledge matters. And what we know, we need to bring it out to the community so that they can know and understand their rights, especially as affected women. So we stand on the front line of struggle as Wamua, but not as helpers. But as helpers and also as leaders, because women are leaders. We cannot shy away from the fact that women have brains. Women, they are able to can hold better positions, whether politically, whether traditionally, or in any other local spaces. So today, what is happening, especially with the 16 days of activism, it has taken a sharp moment, because especially with this the Anglo America that is about to vote on moving its wealth to corporate, especially in Canada. This is very sad because our communities here are actually still waiting for the truth and the justice. The harm that Anglo has done, or rather that has caused, in our water, in our bodies, and in our lives. So we are saying that Anglo cannot just exist just like that. So as Wamua, we are saying that we cannot run. They can't actually run. Anglo cannot run the accountability that they need to take by just changing the postal code. So if mining companies wasn't a future, especially in this so-called green transition, then that's not the future. We must start with repairing and then justice and making that the consent from the communities is get. So as we are here, I want us, to hold on the truth and to make sure that we realize that these mining companies are really doing the worst for our communities. And it's only us as mining affected communities, we make sure that we stand and we do better for those who are not um, taking accountability. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that, Refilwe, and for the work that you are doing as Wamua. To indicate that Anglo is leaving behind a whole lot of mine waste and tailings facilities in the South African context, which contain uranium and a whole range of other radioactive materials and so on. And in Soweto, in large parts of Soweto, we are starting to see birth deformities and on alarming scales, especially in Tulani and Snake Park and so on, as a result of women breathing the dust that contains lead, arsenic, uranium, and other heavy metals, which are very, very problematic. And also, I think that poverty itself is an act of violence against women. And the migrant labor system started off as a system that paid single man's wages because it was argued that women were in the rural areas and the families could be looked after on the land. The mines have no responsibility for their health, education, or the reproduction of the labor itself. And that system has pervaded and continues to be the system, hence the very small pensions and compensations that the mining companies actually pay to individual workers, because they argue that it is payment for an individual worker, not for the family of that worker, production of that worker in the system, placing an additional burden on women in the reproduction of labor in the country. Now, I think that is Lydia Moyo available from Kabwe? Thank you very much. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I go by the name Lydia Moyo. I'm from Kabwe, Zambia in particular. And as most of you may be aware, the fact is that Kabwe is ranked among the world's most polluted places. And this is because of the presence of lead, which was being mined here in Zambia, in Kabwe, for many years, back in the years. At the moment, the Kabwe mine is closed, but as a community, we live with the presence of this effect of lead contamination in our environment. And this lead that is there has caused so many problems for a lot of people, especially in what we refer to as the hotspot areas of lead contamination here in Kabwe. And you would notice that so many people previously were unaware that most of the health challenges that they were facing were as a result of the contamination of the environment due to the presence of this heavy metal. Most people would experience coughs, anemia, and just generally, they were generally unwell. This lead has caused the degradation in the quality of the air. It has degraded the quality of the soil, and it has an effect on the health of people, especially young women, those of childbearing age, and also on young children. So you would find that in my community, a lot of women are being affected in the sense that when they are pregnant, they may suffer miscarriages, meaning because of the presence of lead, the risk of having a miscarriage is very high. And then even generally, their health is unwell. And for the children, you'll find that there is low performance. They underperform whenever they go to school because of the presence of lead in their blood system. It has affected their organs. It has affected the way the brain operates. They are not able to retain much of the information that they get at school. And it's not like these children in Kabwe are dull, so to say, no, but it's because of the challenges that their organs are facing, especially being able to retain the information that they learn. And these problems, it's all attributed to the fact that the mine was operating. When the mine was operating, the people who operated the mine, specifically Anglo American, did not take care of the environment. They didn't take care to ensure that they reduce the effects of pollution. Yes, they profited from the mine for the period that they were involved in the mine. They made the profits, but still they did not take care of the environment. They might have left today, but since then, the effects of lead contamination is having a toll on most of our people. And some are not even aware, even as I speak today, to say this is the effect of lead. So myself and my colleagues in the community who are aware about this effect, we do go out and visit our colleagues who may not be aware and just raise awareness and make them aware to say, most of this is as an effect or as a result of lead contamination, the health problems that they are facing. Most of the water is contaminated. They try to grow crops. The crops don't do well. It's all attributed to the soil quality, which has been contaminated by lead. And then there are other organizations that have come into our communities who are also helping to raise awareness, like Environment Africa. And also the government is also playing its part to help people who have undergone testing and been discovered with lead. They are being afforded an opportunity of healthcare, though it's limited because of lack of resources. So that is what we do as a community. That is what we are doing. But we are hoping that we want Anglo to come and answer to its part that it played when it operated the mine, when it was in charge of the mine. We want Anglo to take responsibility and also provide compensation, possible environmental cleanup, because if you look at most of these people who are affected by lead contamination, most of them are poor. So even the resources to help reduce the effects of lead on their body are very meager, because you find that when you go to the local clinic, you are diagnosed with lead or there's a presence of lead in your body. The advice is that somebody needs to upscale their intake of proteins. So people are advised to take in a lot of milk. People are advised to eat a lot of meat. People are advised to eat any kind of food that has a high protein content. But looking at the economic situations of most families here in Kabwe, if you say, no, you need to eat red meat, for example, or white meat 3 or 4 times in a day, very few people in these communities can afford such a diet. Hence, you find that now the effect of lead keeps on increasing on children, on families, on women. It even affects their ability. Some may even have challenges just to conceive because of the presence of lead. Hence, we are speaking out now. We are raising awareness in communities, and we want Anglo to come and answer for its part that it played during the time it was involved with the mines.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your discussion on Kabwe and the impact of lead. Perhaps you can tell us about whether you have cerebral palsy or birth deformities in that community as a consequence of this pollution?
So in the case of birth deformity, I personally have not come across such a case through my involvement with members of the community. But for cerebral palsy, yes, I've seen quite a number of children that are born with that condition, and most likely it might be certainly attributed to the presence of lead, or the child might have been affected through the blood sharing. The mother and the child, they do share the blood at some point, and that might have been a possible way through which lead entered into the growing child or the embryo in the womb.
It is very interesting, because if we look at Kabwe and we look at Solwezi in northwestern Zambia, as well as Soweto in South Africa, we have incredible amount of cerebral palsy affecting children, and the commonality between them is lead or uranium. Those two metals are common in both cases. So it might be worth our while to join forces in research and so on, to see how we can help one another with regard to this. Tricia, I am calling on you to come and tell us more about the court action that is being taken in the Kabwe case, to tell us what is happening with regard to that, where you are. I know the case has been going on for a while, and what the response of Anglo has been.
Thank you very much, David. I'm Tricia Sibbons, working with Action for Southern Africa. I have 2 colleagues on the call also, Rachel Palmer-Randall and also Julia, who's in the background kind of organising us. Julia will post in the chat the report that Lydia and I contributed to, which we launched in October with Environment Africa in Lusaka and in London. And so that link you can download from our website, and it gives you a very full 4 case studies. Lydia's spoken about some of those, but she also writes about her own experience also in terms of being a mother in Kabwe. So those 5 stories, I think, really symbolize the impact on women in Kabwe, which is something that the court case focuses on, as you say. So 140,000 women and children are seeking through the South African courts to bring a class action against Anglo American, who owned and operated the lead mine from about 1924 to the mid-1970s. The key thing in terms of the claimants is evidence that Anglo knew exactly what was happening to children and families at the time. Certainly in the early 1970s, there were child deaths recorded. And since then, as Lydia explains, that those people who've been able to have their blood tested, it's about 10,000 of them in a recent study done by the hospital in Berlin, Munich, which you can read about in the report. Those children have all got elevated blood levels, sometimes 60 times what is legally recognized as minimal levels, if you like, above which medical treatment is required. And so the class action is the only recourse that this community has to getting any kind of recognition by Anglo American of the damage that they caused in those 50 years, 49 years that they owned and ran the mine. Anglo's argument, and you can read it on its website, its statement is that they didn't own or operate the mine, but actually the evidence when you dig into the archive shows in fact the opposite. So the argument that Anglo is making is that since they left, this pollution has arrived because it was run then by the Zambian government in a nationalized company. When you think about Anglo, essentially it says it signed over its liabilities to the independent Zambian government in the 1970s, and that government took on the liabilities. Of course, that doesn't stack up either in a moral case or in a legal case, and that's what the legal case is about. Working with the community in Kabwe and Lydia and Environment Africa is Action for Southern Africa, trying to highlight the moral case for compensation, for medical treatment to be available fully and on, essentially on demand for those that need it, and for topsoil and renovation and environmental repair. Because if that doesn't happen, every new child that is born in Kabwe today and in the 7 villages around is at risk of lead poisoning. That's what it is. It's lead poisoning, no doubt about it. It's in the soil, it's in the air, and it's in the water supply. And Lydia can talk more in the discussion about, for instance, similar examples across South Africa and in Zimbabwe, where crops won't grow because the soil is polluted, the water is polluted. So I refer you to that report that was produced with the community, with Environment Africa Zambia. It has a huge amount of information in there, including on the case. So the case was heard at the South African Supreme Court on the 3rd and 4th of November, and we're expecting the justices to give their decision in February. So we're obviously very hopeful that the justices will see that without a class action, i.e. an opportunity for the evidence to be presented by the community on a level playing field with the evidence that Anglo wishes to provide in its defence, without that opportunity, justice will not be served. So at this point, we're just talking about getting the case heard. That's what the community have been fighting for now for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that we need to discuss, perhaps in the discussion, the possibilities of South African agencies and organizations, civil society, supporting your case by demanding justice for those people in Kabwe, in terms of our courts and so on, making a bit of noise, newspaper coverage, media coverage, and so on, for this particular story. The other piece of violence that leads from lead, of course, is Zambia produces lead, copper, cobalt, and lead, copper, and cobalt are critical minerals in the weapons industry, in the military industrial complex, and lead is used to kill people. And we know about women and children being slaughtered in Gaza at the moment with copper and lead. We really need to begin to say we don't want blood minerals. We don't want our minerals to be used by the military industrial complex to perpetrate violence in various places, whether it's Ukraine, whether it is the Middle East, whether it's Sudan or elsewhere, because these minerals are often touted as critical minerals, but they are just wasted in warfare. And it is really something that we should also look at to try and stop. I'm going to ask the organizers now to assist us to watch the brief movie that was prepared by Catherine Myberg for this particular event, and then we will go into questions after that. I thank all the speakers for absolutely insightful contributions, and also every time I participate in these events, I get shocked all over again. It's like a traumatic experience all over again to hear these stories, even though I've traveled in Zambia and Zimbabwe and all these places where this happens. The story is the same. It's very common everywhere. And it really is time for the voices of ordinary people and women to be heard with regard to this violence that is being perpetrated. If we can shift over to the film now.
Amane efowuna ke senayo ifowuni athi ubambekile, kodwa utata lengulo yakhe akazange ayithi gabalala ngala mzuzu asemayini. Xa silele iyafika le ngulo, ndimbone lo mntu ulele ecangwa, uyafaza intlungu, ndimshukumisa. Tata kubuhlungu ndawo, tata buhlungu ngandawo. Xa ndiphefumla ndiyavaleka. Ngelinye ilanga silele, ndimva utata esenza isawundi ethi hayibo. Bawo iqalekisa imayini. Utata ke uye wanduluka ke kunene nge-3 ka-August 2014. Wayexelela ubana uba esebenza endaweni eqhumayo, qha umbuzo wam mnye ke xa bembona uba le nto ibangelwa kusebenza endaweni eqhumayo, kutheni bangamsebenzisi kwindawo engaqhumiyo from 1997 to 2005 esebenzisa kwindawo ebona uba inobungozi. Xa kufikelela kobo buthuba intliziyo yam iyaqaqamba, ngoba kaloku ndiqinisekile aba bantwana bafunda kwizikolo ezibalulekileyo. Aba bantwana banazo isenti abakhula bezibekelwe. Lo yena wayekhupha ngaphantsi emgodini isonka, ushiya bakhe abantwana besafarisha bengenayo into abajonge kuyo ngemva. Koko into abanayo ziimemories zikatata wabo abashiya esebenzela uMzantsi Afrika. Cela ubulungisa kuphela kubantu basezimayini abaphetheyo, ngoba kaloku bathembisa ootata iimali ze-saving azange sazibona.
Thank you so much for that very moving piece. Like I say, it's a shock every time we participate in these workshops and see the impact of an industry that made some people very rich but made other people very poor. And yeah, I think we'll go to the floor for questions now, but again, the fact of the matter is that we have 6,200 unrehabilitated mines in South Africa, and mines just get left behind. The story of Kabwe is much the same. No one talks about who's going to maintain the environment after the mining company leaves. Even if the Act says the company has to rehabilitate and close the mine properly, the question is, what happens once they have left and a mine remains active in terms of its polluting impact for hundreds of years beyond mining? And that cost is just simply shifted to the society and to the local communities, and very often to the poorest of the poor people, where the benefits are enjoyed somewhere else. I want the organizers please to assist me with the process of questions and inputs from the floor. If there are any people who would like to say anything about what we have just witnessed in terms of the presentations and also the film, please feel free to participate. Ntebogang, I see your hand is up. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question or make your contribution and tell us what you think?
Yes, David. I wanted to say I can attest to what Ziyanda was saying in her presentation. In June this year, I did some work in Lesotho with Justice for Minors, and the issues affecting families, in particular women and children, are the same everywhere. In the Eastern Cape, in Lesotho, you find similar stories. And it's not only the immediate family that suffers, but the entire community. You find that in most of these communities, all the men, or almost all the men, were sent to work as migrant laborers. So you can imagine how this is affecting different communities. And it's truly heartbreaking.
Thank you, Ntebogang. Any other participants who would like to raise questions, say something about the discussion thus far, the commonality that is there in labor sending areas? Also to remember that the labor sending areas were deprived of their human resources by migrant labor. So the labor sending areas never actually developed, and so they cannot absorb the flood of workers coming back from mines that are retrenching tens of thousands of workers and that are closing down and so on. And that burden is shifted to the caregivers in those communities, and those are the women in those communities. The mining companies are shifting their responsibility and the costs of caring for the broken people that they send back to the communities. Could we see the list of people again? The participants, can we see the participants list so that I can see if there's anyone who wants to speak?
Hi, David, am I audible?
Yes,
You are
Mark.
audible, Mark, you can speak.
Yeah, David, just having watched this video, my condolences to all those family members that have lost their loved ones. My concern is just that, here in South Africa, there is now this new method of mining where they're calling reclamation. And now, they are promising people jobs. My concern is, are we just not going to have a repeat of exactly what is happening now? People are going to come back from those mining operations ill again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That certainly is a concern because they'll be working with tailings dust mainly in the reclamation process. And of course, they will be shifting the tailings to a central giant tailings near Kwatema, which is a highly populated area as well, and that will be affected by the same dust all over again. Because when you reclaim the tailings, you are taking out the minerals, the uranium, the silver, and the gold, but you are leaving the arsenic and you are leaving the lead and the other things that you don't want still there, and the silica, which of course will again impact on that very big community of Kwatema on the East Rand as well. It's not a solution to the current crisis that we are facing. And of course, the thing is, why do we allow a giant like Anglo American simply to leave the country and not take responsibility. Anglo will claim, oh, they sold the mines to other people and that those people took responsibility, just like in the case of Kabwe for the environmental impact, which doesn't hold. I can't murder a person and then put the knife in my brother's hand and say, no, he's responsible because he took over from me. Any other participants who would like to talk about this issue?
It would be great to hear from other women on the call if they've got any experience across the sector. We don't today have anybody from South America, although we anticipated somebody to talk about the Peruvian and Chilean examples. But we can circulate information about that if people would like to have it. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. Also to note that Anglo Gold Ashanti is in Colombia, of course, and the Colombian communities have been fighting tooth and nail to prevent them from extracting gold from La Colosa, a big operation in that particular area. So anyone here who has experience of other countries, other provinces, other areas who would like to share their experiences now, you are most welcome to participate. What I'm not hearing from the conversation is, apart from the court case in Kabwe, how do we hold mining companies responsible? Mark, you have got some court cases going in your area, and we know about some other court cases. If you could perhaps talk about that as well.
Yes, David. We have taken up the Minister for Mining in South Africa. We've taken him up for failure to rehabilitate a mining site. Unfortunately, this is taking so long, and the community is getting frustrated. And yeah, it's just an ongoing thing. I always wonder, why do these cases take so long to come to finality?
Trying to check the chat, I only saw 2 contributions there. I saw from Fatima Vali. Thank you very much to the organizers for organizing a very powerful webinar, and that is noted. If someone else can see the chat better than what I can see it, I'm trying to see what else is there on the chat.
We don't have another question yet, David.
We don't have another question yet. Okay, no. And then have we got Catherine speaking?
And perhaps it's worth, Zianda might come back in if she's still with us, just to talk a bit about the Siamiso Trust and the work that Justice for Miners is doing to lobby them for change.
Zianda, would you want to answer that?
Thank you, David. Yes, it has been the struggle for the past years. Siamiso Trust started, I think, working in 2020, just after COVID. As we all know, the challenges around there. But the main challenges that the ex-mine workers and the families, the beneficiaries, encounter, it's always hiding using the trust deed. Yes, we respect how they work, but the interpretation between ourselves and the trust is always, there are some differences here and there. For instance, I'm going just to mention one. We're talking about Schedule H in their trust deed, which says claimants have to be paid using their MBOD certificate if they choose to. But what they are doing, they are not transparent to these claimants to say when they lost the claim, you can use, more especially the living claimants, you can use your MBOD certificate rather than going to do the benefit medical examination. Because what normally happens, a claimant with the MBOD certificate 2nd degree, sometimes if he can use that certificate, he can be awarded class 2, which is 250,000. I think it's beyond now because of the inflation. But now, if that same claimant will undergo the BME, which means the benefit medical examination, when it comes to Siamiso Trust, 80% of those claimants, they were compensated or awarded class 1, which means the question here is, how is it possible that the doctors that diagnosed this particular claimant said this claimant suffers from second-degree MBOD certificate. Now, after some years, CMSO Trust is doing the same diagnosis. You find that the same claimant is now being lowered to first-degree silicosis. So those are some of the challenges when it comes to living claimants. Some have been rejected, whereby CMSO Trust will say, no, we cannot see any silicosis or TB, whereas the same claimant was retrenched because of medical incapacity. So the trust is not doing any favor. What we have learned over the years is that the mining houses are making sure that this process is not easy, so that part of the 5 billion rands goes back to them. They are treating people as in numbers, because you'll find, no, we have paid 2 billion rand already. But what about the number, the exact number of the people that have been paid? I think last year, August, when I checked when we had, we attended their AGM, they only paid 23,000 claimants. And out of that 23,000 claimants, most of those claimants are living claimants. We have issues around widows and beneficiaries. It is just a nightmare when it comes to that, because the problem that they are facing, they don't have the correct documentation. The same trust fund is not really assisting to just go and work closely with these mining houses that are affected to outsource the medical certificates or the medical history of these of the deceased claimants. So you'll find out that most of, I'm sure it's 99% of the beneficiaries are being told to go and do application of the unabridged certificate to the Department of Home Affairs, which none of them, since 2021, they have received that certificate. The reason why the trust is inquiring that certificate is because they want to see the actual cause of death. In our country, unfortunately, most of death certificates are being written natural causes. So even if a widow does have an MBOD certificate stating exactly that this particular deceased claimant died because of silicosis or TB, it was diagnosed because of silicosis and TB while he was still working. Now, that MBOD certificate cannot assist the beneficiary because the death certificate is written natural causes. So we've been fighting over these years to say you need to amend the trust deed because it is not in favor of these claimants. They cannot, if one person did register for the unabridged certificate in 2021, and up until now, they haven't gotten that unabridged certificate, where are they supposed to get that? Some were requested to go and access the information to the private doctors or certain hospital if that particular living claimant was being treated by the hospital or private doctor. But still, it's still the struggle. I think it's only not even 1% of the widows and beneficiaries that have been paid, that has been compensated because of that. But now, currently, we are busy fighting with them to say, you need to change the trust deed so that you can pay people what is due to them. Secondly, pay those with the MBOD certificate, because when we read or when we went through their forms, the lodgement forms, we realized that that Schedule H clause, it is already there in their lodgement form. But what they are doing, they're just ticking to say this particular claimant has agreed not to go and do the BME, has agreed to go to do the BME rather than choosing to use the MBOD certificate. So CMSO Trust has not been transparent over the years, unfortunately, and the pressure that is coming from the mining houses is just a nightmare, because when we wrote a strong email to these people to say what you are doing is brutality, they just shut us down to say, no, this is what we believe in, because this is what the court or the High Court agreed when the settlement was reached. So we've also engaged with Richard Sport to say, you are the claimant's agent. You need to make sure that there are some changes around this. But unfortunately, some of the things as civil societies, we feel that even the powerful people are not assisting us. We have even also tried our government within each region to say you need to intervene, because we need to make sure that within the 12 years or within even the 6 years now that the trust has been running, that 5 billion rand has been topped up, because it is not the infinite amount. If they can pay people as yesterday, which means the trust can try and find more funds. But again, there was another challenge that the CMSO Trust encountered of running out of administration funds, which means even the way that they have been spending the money, it's not even assisting, because they managed to spend 845 million within since 2020 up until I think this year August, when we attended their AGM. They said, no, we're trying to find other money so that we can continue our work. So those are the things that I think we still need to fight and come together and say we need to put a stop to this, because if the current claimants in their system, they have lost the claim already. What about those that are already retrenched now, which means they are not going to be able to access those funds, which is the same failure that the MBOD is currently doing. Because more especially, I'm going to talk about the Eastern Cape. There's a clinic that government said the mining companies and the MBOD, they're going to assist the ex-mine workers to do the benefit medical examination each and every 2 years. But that clinic is not functional. I went there, I think 2 times. I've called 100 times to do the follow-up to say there are people that are entitled to be compensated again because they have a first degree MBOD certificate. Some are not even aware if they are sick, because it's not easy to detect even to the doctors, the GPs, this illness. So you need to make sure that the clinic is functional. But unfortunately, we have not been assisted. Even our government is shutting us down. If why, we don't know either. But we could keep pushing. The only fortunate claimants, few of them, who were compensated by CMSO Trust, were also contacted by the MBOD to say, yes, we have also we also seen that you were compensated, but we can also compensate you, because when you are looking at the history, you were never compensated before because you were retrenched because of silicosis or TB. Lastly, we have widows that have silico TB certificate, second degree. Those widows or beneficiaries, they do not have a category when it comes to the trust deed. So they just have that document that is lying there that they cannot use because they were not catered for during the time the settlement was reached. So we have claimants like those. CMSO Trust is not doing, even the lawyers, the representatives that represent these claimants, meaning Dr. Sophia and Janet Love, who are there to make sure that the fairness or the smooth operations takes place. They are not doing much compared to what they are supposed to do. So CMSO Trust is not doing any justice. When it comes to the 6 mining companies that have reached the settlement, they are making sure that the process, it is a nightmare. Up until now, I'm sure they have not compensated more than 25,000 claimants around Southern Africa. And most of those that are compensated have been awarded class 1, which means 70,000. Yes, there are some of the things that the successes that we have had so far, whereby we have made the appeals, we have tried to communicate. But what is annoying, I'm sorry to use that word, what is annoying is that they want to use individual cases, rather than to say if we give them a particular case, then they can just make sure that they look over their database. One thing that amazed us as Justice for Minors is that I think just five of the claimants that I assisted from my side back then to do the appeal, the responses that I got from CMSO Trust, which is very much embarrassing for them, is that no, this particular claimant did not use the MBOD certificate because at the time of lodgement, the MBOD certificate was not loaded into our system. Whereas when they started doing their work, they claim that they have all things in place. They have a certain database that they are working with. So as the Justice for Minors, we are still continuing regardless to make sure that compensation is paid and is paid fairly. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much for that detailed discussion. What we find as civil society is that funds that owe mine workers money very often make interest from the money that they owe, and that becomes a disincentive for them to pay out. We also find that the bureaucratic process is unnecessarily bureaucratic and difficult, requiring people living in distant villages and communities who often don't have electricity or internet or Wi-Fi or all the other requirements to make submissions to be able to claim. And we are concerned that pension funds, disability funds, severance packages, and so on actually make money from not paying out what is due to mine workers, whether it's for silicosis or TB, whether it's for disabilities, whether it's pensions. There's some 44 billion rand in pensions that have not been paid out to mine workers, and the pension funds are making a profit from the interest so derived.
We've got Catherine back with us now, David. I don't know if you'll allow Catherine to speak. And then
I just wanted to say, Catherine, if you could join us.
And we've got a comment from Ivor, which I'll share after. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry, I had to go out and in to reset my audio so I could actually unmute. I hope you can hear me. I'm in noisy Johannesburg, big rainstorm. But just to also follow up, it almost sounds like someone was talking, I think it was Mark spoke about the settlement. It almost sounds like the understanding is that the settlement means that silicosis is no longer an issue, that the mines are somehow, after the settlement, having dealt with it. This is far from the truth. There are women miners who only recently started working underground, who on autopsy already have signs of silicosis. So they continue to expose miners to silicosis, and this is going to come through in the decades to come. There will be several cases going on for years and years to come because they are going against the trust level laws. They are not being held accountable. And so that's just one point that one needs to be really clear about. This class action does not mean they have stopped infecting or causing silicosis in miners. Plus, we don't even talk about the amount of disease coming out of coal mines, similar disease to silicosis, black lung disease. There are even more people who've been infected by that and continue to be infected. There is literally no accountability on that. And so these diseases, these occupational health diseases, are fundamentally part of the mining infrastructure, the way they operate, as well as their cost, the way they deal with their profits and how they make profits. Because if they were to make the mine safe, they would not make the profits that they make. So that's the one thing. Another thing is every single mining company, actually every company in South Africa that is registered for pays workmen's compensation, every month, a portion of every salary, every miner, every worker in South Africa whose company is registered, that money goes into the compensation fund. This is not even the pension fund. This is not another fund. This is a statutory fund. It's got billions there, billions and billions and billions, and nobody even knows who's holding them accountable, the compensation fund. And when they pay out, they're paying out even less than the Tsimiso Trust for lung diseases, for injuries, etc. You are destroying a person's life, and there are billions available, and they are investing it. And as David said, there is interest bearing. It's an interest bearing account. They invested in all kinds of stocks and what's, and that alone shouldn't be happening. That money should be going to people who have been injured or have contracted diseases on the mines. And then the last point, I saw the question about the TB for families who've picked up TB that is related to mining. We have to fight. Families do not have access to compensation. That when a mine worker comes home and infects them with TB that the mine worker got on the mines, the family member has no access to compensation at all for their TB that they have got from the miner. So I'm really sorry for the person who raised that question from Makua. That is something we have to fight for, that mining companies have spread TB across the region. Every Southern African country has received TB from South Africa, and it's a huge, huge problem. You cannot go from in any of these countries without seeing a TB clinic or a TB hospital or a TB something or other, and lots of Gates Foundation doing TB research and blah, blah, blah. Why aren't we stopping the TB? Why is the mining not stopping the TB? We have to ask these questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah. I just wanted
Catherine?
to signal the time. So we are now 10 minutes over our allotted. So if people do need to leave, please feel free. We won't be offended. We're very grateful for people having joined. And then just before I hand back to David as our moderator, Ivar, I think, raises a very important point in the chat. And if you haven't had a chance to read that, I'm just going to summarize. He talks about the case of the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance at Bolobeni, etc. And is there a broader conversation, he asks, with other groups, including those who are involved in struggles against fracking, for instance, in Cradock in the Eastern Cape? How should we be thinking about a critical consciousness raising educational program campaign? And I think that's a subject we could have a whole other webinar on, and I would definitely be proposing that AXA talks to colleagues here, Makua and Justice for Miners, about having another conversation or a series of conversations on some of these issues. But I just wanted to say that Julia's also posting in the chat the link to the Makua and Wamua petition against Anglo American leaving, and asking Parliament to set up a special inquiry into what's going on there and why they are potentially being allowed to walk away, leaving the devastation behind that David talked about at the beginning. So I think we're left, as ever, with questions and a potential call to action from Ivar to draw together again and see what organisations are already doing and how we might amplify and strengthen ourselves in the service of attending the needs for communities' voices to be heard and for justice to be gained. Thank you, David. I'll pass back to you for closing remarks.
Thank you. And by way of closing remarks, also just to notice that that Benchmarks Foundation has community monitors in 30 different communities in South Africa, but also across Southern Africa and other parts of the continent as well. And we would be very happy to participate in any discussion on how we take forward the issues there. We think of Marange in Zimbabwe, where diamond mining is in absolute chaos at the moment. It used to be an Anglo American operation under De Beers. We talk about the Jagersfontein, where we've got four court cases going on at the moment. That used to be an Anglo operation as well. And we talk about Mark's case of contempt of court against the minister, because the minister was found in contempt of court 3 times. And the next time that if he's found guilty, the next time he's going to go to jail in the South African context. So I think that it's time for communities to resort to the courts because the politicians and the mine bosses and so on are not paying sufficient attention to the legal issues that they are required to do. And around mine closure and rehabilitation, it is perhaps time to take Anglo to court for the abandonment of mines in South Africa and its impact there. We do find mine communities affected by the dust and so on. But I don't want to talk too much. I want to ask Ziyanda, Refilwe, Lydia to give us the last comments about the discussion today. Their final comments. Let's start with Ziyanda.
Thank you very much once again, David, and thank you very much for giving Justice for Minors this opportunity to also network with other civil societies and people who also attended. Yes, fighting with government and with these giant mining companies is not an easy thing to do. We need each other. And I'm hoping that this is not the last time that we are meeting, as Tricia has indicated. There are a lot of issues within our communities, whether directly involved or not, but we still continue and do the work because we believe that if we can do better and educate and spread and do educational awarenesses to the affected communities, even themselves, they can be able to do better and fight for themselves. So we are grateful for this opportunity and looking forward for other engagement. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Ziyanda. Refilwe Mofokeng from Wamua, if we could have a last word from you.
Okay, thank you so much, David, and thank you to everybody who joined the webinar. So my last words will be, okay, let me start by saying that 2 weeks back or 3 weeks back, as Makua, we had a press conference whereby we invited all the mining affected communities, people to come, and share their experiences or share, what they went through with Anglo. And what we got there is actually a very sad stories that, because like people are not happy with what happened or what is happening in regards with Anglo. Women are being left, just like that. And, even if we can, relate to the clip that was just being played now, we can see that, women are just vulnerable. Women are just going through a lot. And these are the realities that we are living with, especially in the mining affected communities. So I would like to say that, like Ziyanda has just said, that we can never do it alone. We need each other as stakeholders, to make sure that we hold these mining companies accountable. And when we are together, we make sure that, we do our best and the fight will be won at the end. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Lydia Moyo from Kabwe, if we could have a last word from you.
Thank you so much, David, and apologies for the background noise that might be disturbing some of you. My last words would be that it is very important that we ensure that the situation that is currently happening in Kabwe does not happen in South Africa, where Anglo is allowed to exit, minus taking due care of the impact of its mining activities on the mines. The situation that is happening here in Kabwe, it's a very sad situation because for many years, from the time that the mine stopped operating, people have been suffering as a result of this environmental contamination. Children are coughing, they are getting sick every now and then, which is very sad. And people had lost hope. They had literally lost hope. They didn't know what to do with the situation that was currently happening, with very little help coming from other sources like the government and other civil societies and NGOs that have come on board to help. But we noticed that even with this help, some of the resources that are made available are not enough to cater for everybody that has been affected in this situation. So we really hope, and we have so much faith, that this class action that the people of Kabwe are involved in is going to provide us with the much needed justice that we want, provide us with the compensation for suffering the effects of the Anglo American mining activities. And I've just noticed from my colleagues, especially on the panel, who were speaking about what is currently happening in the mining communities in South Africa. I've picked up a lot of lessons from them, and I noticed that as a community here in Zambia, we have a long way to go. We need proper structures, systematic structures that will be able to address these effects of contamination that we are faced with, where people can go and access justice as long as they have suffered the effects of lead in their bodies. So it has been a very, very good opportunity for me to be present at this discussion. And I look forward to further engagements with people who are suffering, communities that are suffering like our community here in Kabwe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the organizers if they want to have a last word, and then we can close the meeting. And thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Tricia, and the people from Justice for Miners as well, the people from Wamua, the people from community structures and organizers, and just other people who participated in this very important webinar. It was a great privilege and an honor for me to participate in it, even though the story that is being told here is very shocking and sad. Tricia, you guys want to say something?
Only that we stand ready to support future webinars. I think if our allies and colleagues could let us know if this space has been useful, if they would like to host, how we might assist.
Refilwe, just switch off your mic. Thank you. Carry on, Tricia.
Well, just how we might assist. I know capacity is sometimes very short in organisations that are fighting big organisations, and we're based in London, but obviously we're working in the region and with allies in the region. So I think reach out to Julia or to Rachel if you would like to engage with us about how we can help further, really just to be at service of the communities here. Just to also say, I'm sorry we didn't have anybody from Peru or Chile, but time zones and other things. And I think we also had at some point interest from the Umki mine in Zimbabwe. So another space may well allow a wider participation. So I think really we're just looking to colleagues on the call and others to just let us know if we can support further. Thank you very much, everybody, and for spending so much time with us and sharing what's been going on and what organisations and communities are going through. Thank you, David. Also,
thank you. I also put my email address there. I've got good contacts with lawyers, with media, and with other organisations and structures in South Africa, but also elsewhere in Southern Africa. Anyone who would like to contact me about the issues that they are dealing with, I can feed through your information to relevant people who might be able to assist. Thank you very much, Tricia and Action for Southern Africa. This has been wonderful to participate in this event, and I am very pleased that I was invited to chair, and I hope that we've done a good job. And thank you, everyone. It has been great. You be well.